How do I change my background? Um, okay. What does this do? A highlight. Interesting. Mm, okay. This is an experimental live. I didn't set this up. Um, so if you're wondering why I went live and you missed it in your notifications, it's because there was no notification ahead of time. Um, YouTube has a new feature that allows you to do live straight from your phone. And I just want to get into it because I want to understand how it works. So I'm tinkering around with some of the features. It's definitely more limited. I can't create a virtual background. I can't chat, I don't think. I don't see how I would chat. So I don't really know how to engage with my audience. Um, but hopefully by the end of this, I will have all of that figured out. Part of what I'll be talking about generally with my lives is kind of the 2024 election and what I think we're going to see as an outcome. I don't think it's any surprise. You know, I don't know why anyone is expecting anything different, but 2024 election is rather unique in that both of the people who are running were the previous presidents. So, if I look at what happened in 2020 and I think about 2024, it's pretty simple. If the same people go to the polls and they vote the same way they did last time, we're going to have the same result. That means Biden's going to be president. He's going to have a little bit over 300 electoral votes. Trump's going to have a little bit over 230. The question really is, will the results be different this time because either the voters have changed or voters' positions on issues have changed? And I don't know if either of those is true. I think that there's going to be a difference in some states. More specifically, I think Georgia's going to be a little different this time. But do I think the rest of the nation's going to be different? Not really. I do a lot of polls with people because I want to understand, are you going to vote differently this time than you did last time? Most people say no. So, okay, um, let's say Georgia is going to turn because they only lost, Trump only lost by like 13,000 votes, which is a very small margin. Okay. If Georgia turns, that's a few electoral votes, but that's not enough for Biden to win. Excuse me, that's not enough for Trump to win. Trump has to change people's minds. Specifically, he's got to try to win Pennsylvania, which I don't think he can do, Michigan, which I think he has to do if he doesn't get Pennsylvania. And then you got to look at the other swing states. The election on Super Tuesday is going to be really simple to understand. You're not going to have to watch all night to see who wins. All you got to do is look and say, is anything starting out differently this time than it did last time? If we don't see a difference in the state's results this time versus last time, then by 7, 8 o'clock, we're already going to know who the president is. Because if all of the states that voted blue continue to, okay, that's telling me we're going to end in the same result. If Florida, for some strange reason, goes Biden, that's pretty much it. You don't have to watch the rest of the night. Biden's going to win the election if he wins Florida. If Georgia goes blue again, you don't really have to watch the rest of the results. Biden's going to win if he gets Georgia again. If Florida holds red, if Georgia returns to being red, okay, now it's more interesting. Now Biden's got some troubles because now you have to say, did he win Pennsylvania? If he does, that looks good for him. Biden loses Pennsylvania, forget it. He's going to lose. It's that simple. You can just look at the maps. And if he gets Pennsylvania, the next biggest state is going to be Michigan. Just looking at the electoral map and where the votes are, Michigan is going to tell us basically everything we need to know. And Michigan is going to be called at about 8 o'clock on Election Tuesday. The first time we get an insight into where Michigan is, about 8 o'clock. So if you watch the election until 8 p.m., just look at which way Michigan goes. If Michigan goes blue, Biden's going to win. If Michigan goes red, Trump's going to win. That's pretty much it. It's about that simple, because once you know where Michigan goes, you know where most of the other swing states are going to go. So I've tried to talk to people to understand what the issues are, why people are voting the way they are, and whether they think the election results are going to be different or not. And it's kind of funny. Very few people have said that they're going to change their mind about who they vote for. There are a few people who said, they're going to flip-flop. They were Biden, and now they're Trump, or they were Trump, and now they're Biden. But that's a tiny minority of people. Most people have said that they are going to vote the same way. That means the results are going to be the same. Now, we've got to see if that's what actually plays out. I'm not running an official poll here, but people are generally either Biden supporters and they're happy with what the last 4 years have looked like, or they're Trump supporters and they're ticked off with what the last 4 years have looked like. I do see some people saying crazy things like the election was stolen. I don't believe that. I've seen the investigations into, the reports that the election was rigged, and every single time, no real evidence seems to hold up. They talked about the Dominion voting machines. Okay. People don't seem to understand that the person who was the head of cybersecurity for the election, a man named Chris Krebs, he's a Republican. Lifelong career Republican, voted for Trump both times. The guy who's responsible for making sure those Dominion machines are legit is a Trump-supporting Republican. And he said that this was the most secure election in history. That told me everything I needed to know about the Dominion voting machines. If somebody wants to complain about them, okay. But the guy who's responsible for looking at them, a guy who's a lifelong Republican, who's got, if he was going to cheat, he'd be cheating and saying, yeah, they were rigged. He said it's legit. He's got his reputation on the line, and he got ticked off at people accusing him of not doing his job, which is why he said he stepped up and said, no, I don't want people spreading a story about the election being rigged, because it wasn't rigged. It's my job to make sure that these machines are legit. I did my job. That's coming from a lifelong Republican, voted for Trump twice. The other conspiracies about the election being rigged got into dead voters. The big one was dead voters or illegal immigrants voting. Okay, illegal immigrants can't vote. That's just silly. And not a single person has been able to point to a single illegal immigrant who voted. So a lot of people are talking about that, but nobody has shown a single illegal immigrant who's voted. The other part was the dead voters. And that was funny because there weren't dead voters, but at least there was a breadcrumb trail. So when they said that there were dead voters, some people looked into it, and this is basically what they found. There was a news station that did an article on dead voters, and they tracked them down because they were trying to prove that there was voter fraud, and they found these 2 dead voters. But this is what happened. Now, I don't remember the voter's name, so we're just going to use, we'll be generic. But first they found like Mr. So and so. Said, look, Mr. So and so is dead, died several years ago. Couldn't have voted. So why do we see his name and a vote, cast for Biden? They went to the house, knocked on the door. This was an actual news feed. And a woman opens the door. They're like, hey, we're looking for Mr. So and so. He passed away. Well, it says here that he voted. So how did he vote if he passed away? And she's like, let me see that. And she's like, no, this is my ballot. They looked at her like, wait, what do you mean? And she's like, I signed my name, Mrs. So and so. And when they looked at the information, that's exactly what it said, Mrs. So and so. She said, look, that's my husband. That's the way I signed my name. I've been signing my name that way ever since I got married. So they just needed to do their diligence because guess what? Mrs. So and so was on the ballot and Mrs. So and so voted. No dead voter there. The other supposed dead voter was they had a name and they went to an address, and it was funny because they go to this address, knock on the door, they ask for this person, they say, look, that person is deceased. Get into this whole question of, okay, how did this person vote then because they're deceased? I'm like, let me see it. Well, you got the wrong address. What are you talking about? So let's say this person's name was John Smith, who lives on First Street. They're like, look, the John Smith who lives on First Street did pass away several years ago. But that ballot says John Smith who lives on Fifth Street. That's not here. They go down to Fifth Street, and guess what? There is a John Smith on Fifth Street, alive and kicking. No dead voter. So he's alive and kicking, and he voted. They just made a mistake in doing their diligence. Not a single dead voter has been identified. Not a single misclick of the Dominion machines has been identified. People say that there's this conspiracy and they say that there was corruption with the voting process, but nobody can actually point to any evidence. And this is the thing that I found was really interesting. I believe it was Lindsey Graham, who was one of Trump's biggest supporters when Trump was in office. And this isn't to bash anybody. This is just to point out people are saying things about the voting process that don't seem to be true at all. Lindsey Graham is one of Trump's biggest supporters. Tells Trump, look, if you can show me evidence of voter corruption, I'll be your biggest champion. I will go to the mats for you. We're not going to stand for this. We got to make sure that this thing is legit. We can't have the country stolen by some mischief with the way the ballots are being counted. Now, Lindsey Graham's one of Trump's biggest supporters while Trump was in office. But the day Trump was out, Lindsey Graham stood on the Senate floor. I will never forget this because it was hilarious to me how this guy just did a complete 180, like within moments of Trump no longer being president. And Lindsey Graham said, hey, I told him, show me the evidence and I'll champion you. And Trump couldn't show me one single shred of evidence. Those words came right out of Lindsey Graham's mouth. They did a close-up of Mike Pence looking at him saying that, and even Mike Pence had to kind of smile and say, wow, you just did a 180-degree turn on your buddy here. You guys were in lockstep, and you just divorced yourself from him like that. I don't think the 2020 election was stolen. But I do think that Trump would have won if he just slightly adjusted his approach. I think Trump would have won 2020 if he encouraged voters to vote by mail. You got to remember, we were in the middle of a pandemic. People were worried about congregating in crowds. Nobody wants to go to polls, risk catching a contagion that can kill them. That's just not what people wanted to be involved in. And Trump told his people to show up at the polls because I think he wanted to rub it in Biden's face that, he believed he was going to win. And if he could say that he won by getting his people to go to the polls in spite of COVID, then that would have just been a feather in his cap. And that's what I believe cost him. And you can kind of see, if you look at the numbers, Trump talks about how he got like 75 million voters. It's like, I got 75 million voters. How did I lose with 75 million votes for me? He's right. He did get 75 million votes. But here's why I think his approach of telling people to go to the polls. Here's where you can see it. Trump versus Hillary Clinton. They both got roughly 65 million votes, give or take. Trump gained 10 million votes. He went from 65 to 75. Biden went from 65 to 80. So they don't talk about that part. Trump gained 10 million voters. Biden gained 15 million voters. And what's the big difference? Biden told his people to vote by mail. Now, I don't know exactly how many ballots were mail-ins, but I do know that mail-in ballots overwhelmingly favored Biden. Biden got a lot of mail-in ballots because he encouraged people to vote by mail. Trump didn't. And when you start counting up those margins, Trump losing by 13,000 votes in Georgia, a population of 11 million people, if he told them to vote by mail, would he have gotten 13,000 votes? Yeah. He'd have gotten a lot more than that. That's why I think he's going to have an easy time winning Georgia this time. There's not going to be that discrepancy in the votes because everybody's got the same information. Both the Republican and Democratic camps understand that encouraging vote by mail is going to be critical because you don't want to have one side getting extra votes that you're not offsetting with the same approach. You have to make sure that you've got people doing the same things to get access to voting that the other side does, or you're going to lose. We learned with kind of Obama when he went up against McCain. Obama started using technology in ways that McCain's party just wasn't really ready for, and he secured voters that McCain wasn't even looking at. Tech is going to be critical to campaigning and winning going forward. People are eventually going to be able to vote from their phone. I don't know that we're there yet, but give us some time, and yeah, you're not going to need to go to the polls. You got your phone. You've got your personal ID. That's a more secure system than almost anything. You get some sort of facial recognition. Now you know you got your voters, and now you can increase the total number of voters. But the issue remains. Some people are going to believe that the election was rigged until their dying day. I have not seen any evidence of this. When people say that the election was rigged, they never are able to produce any hard evidence of this. Just saying, hey, I heard something, or I saw a video where somebody walked by a trash can. No. I want to see something specific. Show me a dead voter and their ballot. Show me an illegal immigrant who voted and show me their ballot. Show me something real. Don't show me some I hope, I think, I'm suspicious type stuff, because that's not going to fly. So that is going to be a really big part of the election is what are we going to do? Because Trump is kind of behind right now. Biden secured states that Hillary couldn't secure. Some of them were kind of close. I mean, let's face it. Georgia, it's a shock to people that Georgia went that Georgia went blue. But it was more a shock to me that at one point Texas was kind of in the running. Texas didn't go blue, and I don't think Texas will go blue. But when you look at Austin and the progress that you're seeing there and the way Austin is blossoming, big cities tend to vote Democrat, small towns tend to vote Republican. And as you continue to see the population of like Austin and Dallas expand, that's going to increase the amount of Democratic support that you see in a state like Texas. Don't expect it to go blue anytime soon. And if Texas went blue, that's it. That's game over. You can't lose California and Texas and New York and expect to win the presidency. But that's not an issue for right now. Now, what is an issue for right now is Trump's path to a victory, because that's where things are very, very muddy. If Trump takes Georgia, if Biden takes Pennsylvania, well, then the question is, how's Trump going to win Michigan? How is Trump going to win a state where Biden stood on a picket line with auto workers and said, hey, I'm here to show my support for you and better working conditions. I don't know what Trump can say that's going to convince people in Michigan that he cares more about them than a guy who stood on the picket lines with them. And if he can't win Michigan, that's kind of the ball game. Now, he may be able to turn things around. I don't know. I haven't seen the play that he's got in the playbook for Michigan. I've seen him campaigning in Georgia. I get it, but I don't think that that's where he should focus because I think he's already got Georgia locked up. Um, I've seen a little bit of activity in Michigan, but again, I haven't seen the big move. I haven't seen the big bet. Like, what are you going to do in Michigan to convince them that you're their guy? Um, if you look at what's going on with some of the smaller races in Michigan, it's just not. It's not suggesting that he's going to win. Um, what's happening in these small elections does not necessarily translate to what's going to happen in the big election, but it does raise the question: Why do people think Trump might win in Michigan if he didn't win in Michigan before, and if Biden has done a more public display of his support? And most people, again, seem to be planning to vote the same way they did last time. And if the same people go to the polls and they vote the same way they did last time, we're going to have the same result. Unless there are different people voting or unless people vote for a different candidate this time, we already know what the result is. Biden's going to be president, going to have roughly 300 electoral votes to Trump's roughly 230 electoral votes. You know, cue the ticker tape in the parade. We don't have to wonder about anything there. The whole question is, has Trump convinced people to come over to his side? And I just haven't heard. I haven't heard that. I don't think he's lost anybody. I just don't think he's gained anybody. Yeah, there'll be a couple of people who say they're going to flip flop. But there are a couple of people who are flipping the Democrat. There are a couple of people who are flipping the Republican. I don't see a large bias one way or the other. So that's a wash. And that means we're going to have the same election result because we have basically the same votes. When you go through the issues, people are split. It's funny that people have very different reasons for disliking Biden versus disliking Trump. The people who dislike Biden dislike him because of his policies. The people who dislike Trump dislike him because of his character. People who don't like Biden will cite specific things, like his approach to immigration being the biggest thing. But they'll get into kind of his focus on supporting foreign wars instead of spending those dollars domestically. Him not seeming to be as focused on American energy and American strength. A lot of things like that. Basically, the feeling that people who don't like Biden have is he's taking my money, he's taking my tax dollars, and he's spending them on everybody but me. And I don't like that. And I understand that. Look, I don't want my tax dollars being spent on everybody else when I got to put food on my own table. That's not hard to understand. The people who don't like Trump mainly don't like him because of his personality, because of his behaviors. They talk about January the 6th. That's a big thing that gets cited. They also talk about his business dealings or the sexual misconduct issues that he's had. And he's currently got a case that's scheduled to start. Stormy Daniels, the New York hush money case. Those are the things that get Trump into trouble. For some people, the character of the president is almost more important than the policy. For a lot of people, they want a president who they feel is going to be a good representative of their morals. And that's where they have an issue with Trump. They'll say, Trump does things that philosophically I don't agree with. They don't really seem to get into his policies at all. A lot of it has to do with Trump's demeanor. And it's very curious because when you think about that, it kind of begs the question, if there was a different Republican candidate, would they win a sweeping victory? Because the people who are supporting Biden aren't as passionate about Biden as the people who are supporting Trump are about Trump. That's just a fact. And we'll never know that because clearly this race is going to be Biden versus Trump. But those are the issues. Can Trump overcome the perceptions of him being a little bit eccentric? He says crazy things. He does crazy things. He's tweeting out stuff that presidents don't normally tweet out. He's interesting. I mean, there's a potential train wreck every single day. And truth be told, I have a Twitter account. Elon Musk banned me on it, but that's a whole separate thing. I have a Twitter account. I've had it for years. I never really paid attention to Twitter till Trump was president because Trump would say crazy things on Twitter. I didn't want to miss the next new tweet because I didn't want to be behind the times. Trump becomes the story wherever he goes. If Trump's president, you're going to have 4 years of nonstop news. Every day you're going to be sitting back wondering, what is this guy going to say next? We already know this because we saw him during the last presidency. Crazy tweets, crazy emails, he forwards things out, weird conspiracies. That's not the stuff I expect to see from a president. But if a president is pushing that kind of message out, heck yeah, I'm going to tune in. I want to know what he had to say. I don't care if it's a conspiracy. It's the president who's saying it. And I want to be involved in that story. Biden, boring. Biden's stories are, very plain, very fact-based. There's not really anything upsetting, let's say, about the way he presents the story. You might not like what he's doing, but you generally don't have an issue with the way he's describing it. He's not berating people. He's kind of what you expect the president to be, just plain and informative. That's a double-edged sword because Trump being that lightning rod absolutely rubs some people the right way and absolutely rubs some people the wrong way. And in the way that it makes people really support him, it also makes some people really hate him. I have yet to see who's converting to the Republican Party from the Democratic Party. I just don't see people converting. But I also really don't see people converting from the Democratic Party to the. I don't see conversion either way. Now, there have been some very public renouncements of Trump. His own vice president, Mike Pence, came out and said that he's not voting for Trump. Now, it's a weird thing that Mike Pence did, and I wondered why he made that so public. But Pence has gone on record saying he's not voting for Trump. Problem is, Pence has also gone on record saying he's not voting for Biden. So, what's going on, Mike Pence? If you're not voting for Trump and you're not voting for Biden, then who the heck are you voting for? Because I don't think you're going to go independent. That in his position, that doesn't make sense. And independents should really take a step back and think about their vote this time around. Because let's face it, if the people who voted independent in Georgia all picked a side, they could have determined Georgia. If the people who voted independent in Pennsylvania all picked a side, that might have been the difference between Trump and Biden in Pennsylvania. If the independents pick a side, that might determine a state. If you're in one of those, there were 3 swing states. That can absolutely determine who the voter is. This is a new format for me. So I see I've got a comment. I got to look closely. Okay. We should grow vegetables and not elect them. So I don't know. I mean, I hear a lot of people saying that kind of, don't vote. I heard someone describe it as vote for the couch. I get the idea that you're not in love with either one of the candidates, but the reality is somebody's going to win. Biden or Trump is going to win this election. So It's better to pick, even though you don't have it's better to pick like the choice you feel is the best of the bad bunch than to not pick at all. Because someone's going to win, and what you don't want, well, let's say, what I wouldn't want is to not vote and then to look at my state and say, you know what? My state was close. My state came down to a couple of thousand votes. Oh man, if I had voted and I got my friends who were all thinking, vote for the couch, if we all voted, that might have made a difference. That is a very real issue that we could be facing in some of the swing states. Pennsylvania, that could come down to a razor thin margin. I'm assuming that Trump is going to take back Georgia. But if he does, that still might come down to a very thin margin. So those independent votes, they could turn the tide one way or the other. If you live in the swing state, just kind of take a moment to think about: do I want to risk it? Like, can I live with one of these candidates more than the other? Recognize you don't like either one, but is there one you can deal with more than the other? Because if you vote independent, you might end up with the guy who you like the least. Lesser of the evil. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's the lesser evil. We're not pretending like, there's a good vote here. Like, I got evil number one and evil number two. I just feel like evil number one is a little bit less disastrous, so that's what I'm going to go with. I don't fully love, well, there are a lot of things Biden says that I don't agree with. There are a lot of things Trump says that I don't agree with. I think Biden does a better job with foreign policy. I think Trump does a better job with domestic policy. But I do find it interesting that you've got Mike Pence, Trump's own vice president, saying he won't vote for him. You've got Mitt Romney, former presidential candidate, who said that he won't vote for Trump. That's the stuff that's weird to me. You have very public Republican personalities. You've got senators, you've got statesmen, and they're saying, you know what? We're abandoning Trump. That's just a weird thing to me. I don't know why they feel the need to go public with the statement, but they do, and that's very telling. They need the world to know that they're not supporting him. I haven't heard Democrats do that for Biden. I've heard Democrats say that they feel like Biden might be a little bit weak, that they wish he had, kind of stronger presence, stronger position on some things. But they're still in the Biden boat. They're not abandoning him, and that says something to me. Now, will that change in the coming months? I don't know, but I don't really expect it. I mean, it's kind of a weird phenomenon. When have we in history had a vice president say that he was not going to vote for the guy that he ran with, the guy who picked him to be vice president? I don't know that that's ever happened. More often than not, a vice president is locked up with the president, and if the vice president wins after the first guy's been in office for 8 years, it's because you're expecting 8 more years of the same kind of events. This isn't what's happening this time around. This time it's different. So we're going to have to see. We're going to have to see if things change. As far as I know, they're not. I don't trust any polling numbers because polls can be manipulated. I actually did a video about that, and I would caution anybody who's looking at polls to try to understand what's going on, because here's the deal about polls. You have to look at whether that polling company is trying to tell you the real story or if they're trying to sell their guy. When you look at the states and you look at the way the votes work, people may not realize, but the election kind of comes down to a decision between how big cities think and how small towns think. You can take the map, and when you look at maps for most states, most of the map is small towns. But small towns generally have small populations. there will be a couple of spots on the map that are big cities. And those big cities, the 4 or 5 big cities in a state, have as much, if not more, population than all of the small towns combined. So you can easily run a poll. And big cities generally tend to vote Democratic. Small towns generally vote Republican. So big cities versus small towns tends to be Democrat versus Republican. And once you understand that, it's very easy to run a poll and to get the exact result you want. Because if I want to run a poll and I want to say that Trump's going to win, I'm going to focus on small towns. I'm not going to look at big cities. I don't want to. I already know what they're going to tell me. If I want to run a poll and I want to say that Biden is going to win, I'm focusing on the big cities because then I know what the result is going to be. I don't really care what state you go to. This is consistently what you're going to find. In almost every single state, the small towns are overwhelmingly voting Republican. The big cities are overwhelmingly voting Democrat. And it just boils down to whether you've got more people voting in the small towns or more people voting in the big cities. That's what drives the election. It does make it harder for the Republicans to rally people because they've got to cover more area. Now, if I need to get the votes of people in the small towns, I've really got to reach out. I've got to spread myself. And I think that's why they tend to focus on unions that, let me focus on auto workers. I can get a lot of people who have a similar mindset if I can focus on auto workers and drive a message home that makes sense to them. Big cities, it's just a matter of saying, you know what? I have a few areas I need to hit. I need to hit them really hard, but there's a lot of bang for my buck. So I'm focusing there, and that's what I'm going to do to drive, my support and to try to win this election. That's why I think Biden went and stood on that picket line in Michigan. He knew that Michigan is potentially the state that's going to determine the race. He knew this years ago. So he went and stood on that picket line with the auto workers so that he could get some small town support. If he gets his big cities and he gets some small town support, he gets Michigan. That's just math. He can't lose Michigan if he gets the big cities and some of the small town. Trump has to get the small towns or he loses that vote. Now, will he? I don't know. I don't think he will. I could be wrong, but I just haven't seen him do anything that is going to encourage them to follow him. And that's what it boils down to. What have you done to earn their vote? So it'll be interesting. And admittedly, this was a different kind of live for me. I don't normally do these types of lives. I normally run a stream Tuesday nights, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, and that's where I try to have a richer discussion. There are a few more people who are kind of the usuals who show up there. However, tonight I wanted to try out this feature. I actually think it's kind of interesting, so I might start doing some of my live streams here. Next time I do a live stream on this, now that I've played with it and I understand how it works a little bit more, I'll have it together a little bit. This one wasn't as polished. I had to try it out. Next time we'll put a little more effort into it. But I'm the last good man in Jersey. Definitely, if you've made it this far, if you're interested in hearing more about this, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. I put out a pretty good amount of content, and I really encourage a discussion about the issues because I don't just want you guys to listen to one more guy lecture. I want people to hear what's going on in America. There are people who believe that there's no way anybody's going to vote for the other side's candidate. But when they come to the chat and they see what people are saying, they start to realize, hey, there's a reason why Biden's got support. There's a reason why Trump's got support. Not everybody thinks the way I do. This election is going to come down to, it can come down to the wire. But again, by 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we're going to know Michigan. And when we know Michigan, we know who won the election. We'll see if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. It's the last good man in Jersey, signing out.